You know that feeling right before you hit checkout? Like something about the price just isn't adding up? Turns out you weren't imagining it. A federal jury in Manhattan just confirmed it. Ticketmaster has been secretly adding a hidden monopoly tax, about $1.72, on tickets at major U.S. venues. So while you were saving up, budgeting, making it work just to see your favorite artist, Ticketmaster executives were laughing, calling fans stupid, and openly boasting about robbing them blind. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was happening every single time. Now, Ticketmaster is finally getting what it deserves. Chapter 1. The $1.72 Receipt. On April 15, 2026, something happened that live music fans have been waiting years to see. A federal jury in New York delivered a verdict against entertainment giant Live Nation and its subsidiary Ticketmaster. They were found liable for running an illegal monopoly over the live events and ticketing industry, violating both federal and state antitrust laws in the process. Ticketmaster had been overcharging and essentially stealing from fans for years. $1.72 per ticket. It doesn't sound like much. You can't even buy a coffee for that. But this isn't about an individual charge. It's about that small fee being applied over and over again. It was a massive windfall of pure monopoly profit, and it was coming straight out of fans' bank accounts. It was a racket, one that had gone on for years. Live Nation and Ticketmaster made millions of dollars through this sneaky tactic. It was going into their bank account, not the artists, not the road crews, management teams, agents, or even the venues that host them. That's why the jury's decision matters so much. Because this wasn't a legal defeat for Live Nation and Ticketmaster, it was an unmasking of a long-running financial crime that had been hiding in plain sight all this time. For years, fans were treated like fools. They were lied to. They were told rising ticket prices were the result of vague market forces or economic changes. They were deceived into thinking that rising production costs or money-hungry artists were the reason they had to spend more on concert tickets. This verdict collapses the foundations propping up that pack of lies. After reviewing thousands of pages of financial records, ledgers, and internal communications, the jury had zero doubt. This wasn't about inflation. It wasn't about artist demands. It was all about Ticketmaster and Live Nation exploiting fans any way they could. Evidence proved that the $1.72 wasn't tied to any real service, cost, or innovation at all. Ticketmaster and Live Nation weren't providing anything in exchange for that money. It was a forced overcharge by a company that knew it had total control. If you wanted to see a major artist in a big venue, there was no way around it. You had to pay. But if they can extract $1.72 from every ticket and no one stops it, what else are they hiding in the math? Chapter 2. The Flywheel of Doom. The reason Ticketmaster was able to enforce this hidden charge and make it impossible for fans to avoid comes down to something called the flywheel. It's what Live Nation calls their system internally, a connected web of businesses and the core of this entire story. In a healthy, hypothetical market, companies play their own distinct roles. Promoters work on marketing shows and generating ticket sales. Then there are the companies that own and manage the venues where the performers can appear. Then there are the people responsible for selling the tickets, and others that handle parking, hospitality, and so on. Lots of different players, each with their own values, policies, and priorities. They are separate entities, but they all operate on the same stage. They work and negotiate with each other to form a complex system of checks and balances, one that's meant to keep prices competitive for the customer. When multiple companies operate in the same industry, they naturally compete with each other and to some extent they keep each other in check. If a ticketing company charges unnecessary fees, venues might decide to not work with it. They have plenty of other options to choose from after all, and if a promoter is abusive or exploitative, artists can choose to work with a different one. Or if a venue gets a bad reputation, then tour organizers will avoid it in the future. It's competition that provides the pressure and incentive for companies to operate to certain standards. And it's competition that keeps prices reasonably fair for the fans. Businesses know that if they set their rates too high, their rivals will undercut them. But that's not at all how the market works under Live Nation and Ticketmaster. The flywheel was laid bare for all to see during the trial, and the evidence was startling. Live Nation doesn't just play a part in the ticketing industry, it is the ticketing industry. Its sprawling web of tendrils reaches every element of the entertainment world. It manages the artists, it promotes the tours, it holds exclusive long-term deals with the biggest venues, and of course, via Ticketmaster, it sells the tickets. Live Nation controls 86% of primary ticketing at major venues across the United States. It is a monopoly. It's not just in ticketing where Live Nation's influence is felt. It also runs 70% of the promotion market for major tours, along with large parts of other submarkets that make up the ticketing and events industries. When you have one company controlling the supply, the infrastructure, and the point of sale, the idea of competition and fairness starts to sound like fiction. How can any company compete with them? Prosecutors argued during the case that a new company couldn't just make a better app or offer less fees. It would have to literally build its own venues and sign its own artists just to get close to competing with Live Nation. That is the power of the flywheel in action. Every spoke strengthens the next. By owning the venues, Live Nation could secure promotion. By securing promotion, it became the de facto source for ticketing. And by running the vast majority of ticket sales, it was able to maintain its venue control. The wheel comes full circle. The company could sign a new artist to a management deal, then use its promotion arm to book shows for that artist at Live Nation-owned venues across America. Those venues could then be forced to use Ticketmaster as the one and only ticketing platform, and the $1.72 monopoly tax could be easily imposed. None of this was an accident or a byproduct of market conditions. It was a weaponized system designed to trap consumers. The executives knew exactly what they were doing the entire time, and it got personal. Chapter 3 – The Leaked Slack Tapes. In March 2026, a series of court filings revealed confidential Slack communications between Live Nation ticketing executives. Among them were messages from Ben Baker, the head of ticketing for Live Nation venues. They revealed the ugly truth about the higher-ups at the company and how they viewed their customers. In one message, Baker said, "These people are so stupid I almost feel bad taking advantage of them." He also admitted to, quote, "robbing them blind, baby," and took delight in imposing extortionate fees for the most basic of services. Quote, "I charge $50 to park in the grass, LMAO," Baker said in one exchange with a fellow Live Nation employee, Jeff Weinhold, adding, "I charge $60 for closer grass." Baker and other ticketing employees wondered how high they could price different tiers of parking while still getting people to pay for them. He joked about how oversized parking was available for $100, while Jeff Weinhold went on to set rates of $250 for VIP parking at another event. Defending himself in court, Baker argued, "There's no excuse for the language," which he described as very regrettable, immature language. But he argued he was just expressing his surprise at how much people were willing to pay for services they didn't necessarily need. And it wasn't just the language of the messages that shocked people, it was the culture behind them. The leaks showed the whole world what Baker and his fellow executives thought about music lovers and event goers. Their messages didn't involve them working out ways to offer quality services, fair prices, and experiences for the average fan. They weren't discussing how to level up their brand. This was just about making money. It was about exploitation followed by ridicule. Every company exists to profit, but the methods described inside Live Nation were something else entirely. With monopoly control over the market, Live Nation had no incentive to hold back. Instead, it leaned into what critics described as ancillary gouging tactics, driving up the price of everything around the ticket itself. It wasn't just tickets and transport. Fans were hit with a growing list of extra costs: premium parking tiers, VIP upgrades, add-ons, bonus packages, optional extras. It didn't stop. The list kept growing in size and price. These executives weren't just greedy, they viewed their customers with nothing but contempt and thought they could get away with it. But in the end, their arrogance caught the attention of one group they couldn't buy off. Chapter 4 – The Hush Money Settlement. For years, the arrogance of these Live Nation executives made sense because they got away with their crimes. Year after year, they continued to squeeze more and more money out of their customers. The Ticketmaster machine rumbled along and event-goers were left with no other option but to climb aboard. But in May 2024, the wheels fell off. The U.S. Department of Justice, together with 30 state and district attorneys general, filed an antitrust lawsuit. They alleged that Live Nation held an unfair and unlawful monopoly in the live event sector. Several other attorneys general representing other states later joined the lawsuit. At last, it looked like the company might actually face consequences. It took time for both sides to prepare their cases, but on March 2, 2026, the trial officially began. However, just days into the proceedings on March 9th, the DOJ announced that it had cut a deal with Live Nation. The company would pay a $280 million settlement fund, which would then be divided among participating states. To an average person, $280 million sounds like a huge sum. But for a company that makes literally billions of dollars in revenue every year, it is barely a drop in the ocean. Data from 2023 shows that Live Nation reported $22.7 billion in revenue in that year alone. $280 million is less than 1.5% of the company's annual revenue. That is someone getting a $600 parking ticket when they make $50,000 a year. It hardly seems like a punishment, and it doesn't seem to be any sort of deterrent either. If Live Nation knows it can get away with ripping people off and only has to pay a tiny fraction of the profits back, then it'll keep doing it. It wasn't a penalty, it was just the cost of doing business. It was a way for the corporation to maintain its monopoly, prevent any further investigation into its underhanded tactics, and get back to the business of exploitation. Except that is not what happened. Because when the DOJ failed to deliver, the individual states stepped up to the plate. A bipartisan coalition of 34 state attorneys general looked at the federal government settlement and collectively shook their heads. They weren't interested in giving Live Nation a slap on the wrist. They understood that a small fine is not how you smash a monopoly. They wanted to see exactly how this company operated. They wanted to look at the inner workings of this so-called flywheel to see exactly how much the organization was overcharging people, how they'd gotten away with it for so long. So they demanded a full trial. Chapter 5 – The Moat Around the Castle. During the trial, Live Nation's defense largely boiled down to one simple narrative: we are the biggest because we're the best. The company argued that its huge size, its success, and monopoly were all the result of it simply being good at what it did. Its excellence propelled it to the top of the food chain in all key areas of the live events industry. People naturally flocked to Ticketmaster because of its technology and interface. When artists wanted to plan and promote their tours, they turned to Live Nation because of its global reach and proven pedigree. It was a compelling argument, but not one that stood up to scrutiny. The evidence proved that Live Nation wasn't really relying on excellence or superiority in its services to maintain its massive market share. Instead, it relied on retaliation. After analyzing 257 major venues across the United States, the prosecution team found a clear and consistent pattern of corporate bullying. If a venue considered moving its ticketing contract to one of Ticketmaster's competitors, like AEG or SeatGeek, Live Nation would effectively threaten them. They would issue a message along the lines of, "If you don't use Ticketmaster, then our artists won't play at your venue." By controlling or restricting access to top talent, Live Nation was able to hold venues to ransom. One key piece of testimony showed that Live Nation didn't just compete with the venues, it actively tracked them. When an independent venue started gaining momentum, selling more tickets and outperforming expectations, executives would allegedly step in. They would use aggressive tactics to redirect tours away from the venue or pressure them into joining the Ticketmaster system. They would use any method to prevent a competitor from even touching its market share. Unfortunately for Live Nation, the jury saw right through it, and that led to a landmark decision that could trigger the biggest corporate execution in modern history. Chapter 6 – The Corporate Collapse. The verdict was both unanimous and devastating for Live Nation. The jury found the company and its subsidiary Ticketmaster liable for all federal and state law claims of monopolistic behavior and illegal restraint of trade. In the corporate world, those kinds of verdicts are a death sentence. But cases of this size are complicated and they take time to reach their true conclusions. Even when juries have issued their verdicts, that doesn't necessarily mean it's over. Live Nation still has the right to appeal and will likely do so, but overturning the jury's decision might be difficult. There is simply too much evidence building a clear, detailed picture of how the company operated. Eventually, the court will decide how to remedy the harm and compensate those affected. There are a few possible outcomes. A structural remedy would force the company to sell off assets or break up parts of its business. A behavioral remedy would impose new rules on how it can operate going forward. And a monetary remedy would require it to pay financial compensation to those who were harmed. Much rests on the shoulders of the judge. He'll be the one to ultimately decide how this case ends. The states have made their position clear. They want to see the Live Nation monopoly torn apart and force the sale of Ticketmaster, breaking the closed-loop flywheel system that allowed it to gain so much power. Live Nation, meanwhile, has tried to argue for a settlement, but the panic among its executives is spreading. Share prices for Live Nation fell over 6% after the verdict was announced, while the shares for rival firms like StubHub rose. Investors were already backing out, aware of what this verdict would signal. The monopoly may have lasted for years, but it's now tumbling down. The battle for the future of the live events industry, meanwhile, is only just beginning. Chapter 7: The Fan's Revenge. This case is about so much more than ticket fees or parking prices. It's about how much power corporations have and whether everyday people and state governments can actually hold them accountable. In this case, the fans won, and they did so thanks to something that big businesses detest: specifics. It would have been easy for Live Nation to leverage its power to shut down claims about higher prices or vague claims of market dominance. So the states came prepared. They shared real numbers, real data, and real specifics. Not just excess charges, but $1.72 on tickets. Not just monopoly, but 86% control of major event venues. Not just rumors about a toxic company culture, but genuine Slack messages where executives laughed about how much money they're taking from people. And through all of this, the blueprint has been set. If another company tries something similar, the justice system knows exactly how to handle them. That's important. But nobody is under any illusions here. A single verdict isn't going to fix the entire industry or bring about fairer rates, but it does set a powerful precedent. It gives future courts and claimants the strength and solid backing they need to hold these corporations accountable. Live Nation's monopoly has been outed. It's no longer just a fear that people get when they're buying tickets and feel as though they're being made to pay over the odds. It's real. As for the future, that all depends on what happens next. The market wasn't strong enough to discipline Live Nation's monopoly, but the court of law has the power to dismantle it entirely. The only question left is whether or not it'll choose to do so. If it does, then nothing will be the same again. It might not be perfect, but it would be a whole lot fairer. If one corporation like Live Nation can grow this powerful under everyone's watch, then what else is going on in the background? Find out in Secret Rich Families Controlling the Economy to see the kind of power that shapes our world. Or watch this video instead.